Welcome back, everyone, to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling a case study that I find really fascinating.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Wipro Technologies.
Uh,
Now, they're one of India's biggest IT solutions providers. But here's the kicker. They actually set their sights on competing with giants like IBM and Accenture on a global level.
That's ambitious.
Oh, it is incredibly ambitious. And what's so interesting is how they organize themselves to make this incredible transformation happen.
Yeah.
How did they pull that off? What were those steps?
It's a story that really emphasizes how making smart choices about how your organization's structured can be a game changer,
Yeah,
especially when you're going for that kind of growth and global impact.
exactly. And that's why we're here today, to unpack those steps, those organizational choices that helped Wipro skyrocket.
Right. And one of the first things they did was actually really brilliant. They split themselves into smaller units,
Okay.
like self-sufficient subsidiaries.
Uh-huh.
Think telecommunications, engineering, financial services, each one pulling in about $300 million every year.
Wow. So it's almost like they built mini companies within the larger Wipro world.
Yeah.
They really shook things up. I'm curious, what was the reason behind that restructuring?
It was all about moving from this centralized way of managing everything to a more decentralized approach.
Okay.
And this wasn't just about dividing the work and travel. They were aligning their structure with their goals,
I see.
which were very much focused on the customer.
Got it.
Actually, Azim Premji, Wipro's chairman at the time, he said, and I quote, "We tried to delayer the organization and empower our business leaders with a much higher degree of growth responsibility. We removed an entire layer of executives."
Whoa, they got rid of an entire management layer?
Yeah.
That's a bold move. Could that have backfired?
Well, it was definitely a risk, but it seems to have worked out pretty well for them.
Yeah.
This decentralization really let Wipro become much more agile and responsive to what their clients needed. The people leading those subsidiaries, they were closer to the action so they could make decisions faster, adapt to changes in the market more quickly, and ultimately serve their customers better.
I'm starting to see how it all fits together.
Yeah.
But I have to admit, whenever someone says organization structure, my brain kind of shuts off.
I get that.
It all seems so technical and abstract.
I understand, but think of it this way. An organization structure is like a blueprint for a building.
Okay.
So just as a well-designed building needs a good foundation and framework to work properly, a company needs the right structure to hit its goals.
Okay, that analogy makes sense. So when it comes to structuring a company, what are the different blueprints out there?
Well, two of the most common structures are functional and divisional.
Okay.
Let's start with the functional structure.
Okay.
It's all about grouping similar jobs together into departments,
Right.
like, marketing, finance, production.
Uh-huh.
This way, each department has specialized experts, which can make things more efficient and controlled.
That makes sense. But wouldn't that also create those dreaded silos where departments get isolated and communication breaks down?
Right.
I've experienced that firsthand, and it's not fun.
You're absolutely right. That's one of the big downsides of a purely functional structure.
Yeah.
It can throw up roadblocks for communication, collaboration, even innovation. And it can also limit the growth of managers because they're so focused on their one specific area.
So what about divisional structure then? How's that different?
With a divisional structure, you divide the organization by product lines or maybe geographic regions.
Okay.
And each division has its own set of functions, so its own marketing, its own finance, and so on.
So in Wipro's case, each of those product line subsidiaries would essentially be a division, right?
Exactly.
Each with its own mini ecosystem of departments.
Yeah, this model provides a lot more focus, accountability, and flexibility.
I see.
Makes sense for companies that want to be super responsive to specific markets or customer needs.
Makes sense.
And it makes expansion easier because they can just add a new division whenever they need to.
But wouldn't that mean they're duplicating a lot of effort?
Oh, yeah.
Like if every division has its own marketing team, wouldn't that be redundant and possibly lead to clashing strategies?
You're right, that is a valid concern. And one of the trade-offs you make with the divisional structure,
Okay.
there's a risk of duplicated resources and potential for conflict between the divisions, but the benefits, they often outweigh those risks,
Gotcha.
especially for companies like Wipro that are shooting for rapid growth and that global reach.
So it's about choosing the right tool for the job.
Yeah,
Each structure has its pros and cons depending on the company's goals and the problem they're facing.
right.
But I'm still curious about how Wipro actually made this decentralized model work.
Right.
It seems like there's more to it than just moving boxes around on an org chart.
You're right. It's not just about changing the structure on paper. It's about changing how people actually work.
Okay.
One of the things that really helped Wipro succeed was their focus on delegation, empowering people at all levels to make decisions and own their work.
Delegation. Okay, that's something I definitely want to dig into. It sounds like a straightforward concept,
Mm-hmm.
but I have a feeling there's more to it than meets the eye.
You're absolutely right. Delegation is way more than just handing off tasks. It's a strategic leadership tool.
Okay.
And when you do it right, it's incredibly powerful.
Well, before we get into that,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important to define what we mean by delegation, especially for anyone listening who might be new to this concept.
You're right.
Yeah.
At its core, delegation is all about transferring authority down the chain of command.
Okay.
But it's not about a manager just dumping their work on someone else.
Uh-huh.
It's about empowering people to make decisions and really own their work.
So it's not just about clearing your plate.
No,
It's about helping your team grow by giving them opportunities.
absolutely.
That makes sense. So it's actually good for both managers and employees then.
Yeah, it gives employees the chance to stretch their skills, take on new challenges,
Yeah.
and feel a greater sense of ownership and accomplishment.
That's a great point. It's a win-win situation.
Mm-hmm.
And this ties back to Wipro's decentralized model, right?
Right.
Where they were focused on empowering those business leaders.
Absolutely. By delegating, well, Wipro's leaders could focus on the big picture.
Right.
And at the same time, they were nurturing a sense of accountability and ownership
Yeah.
across the whole company.
So delegation really was a key part of their success. But how does it work in practice?
Yeah, that's the question.
What are some examples of things that managers might delegate? And what's the secret to doing it effectively?
Those are great questions, and they lead us right into the heart of what makes delegation such a powerful tool. So let's say you're managing a team at Wipro's telecommunications subsidiary.
Okay.
You could delegate things like planning a project or doing market research. You
Yeah.
could even have team members handle some client communication.
That makes sense because it frees up the manager's time to think more strategically about the bigger picture,
Yeah.
and it gives those team members valuable experience.
Yeah.
But what if someone makes a mistake?
Right.
Isn't there a risk that delegating could lead to things going wrong?
There's always some risk, but that's where clear communication and good training come in.
Okay.
Before handing off a task, the manager needs to really lay out what's expected, provide any resources or training that's needed, and set up checkpoints for feedback and support along the way.
So you're not just throwing someone into the deep end and hoping for the best.
Exactly.
It's about equipping them to succeed.
Yeah.
It's a balance, isn't it?
Yeah.
Between giving people autonomy and making sure things stay on track.
You're right on the money. Effective delegation needs a good amount of trust and open communication.
Okay.
The manager has to trust their team to get the job done,
Right.
and the team needs to feel comfortable speaking up, asking questions, and getting guidance when they need it.
This reminds me of something you mentioned earlier about formal versus informal organization.
Yeah.
Can you remind us what that's all about and how it relates to delegation?
Sure. Formal organization is basically the official structure of a company. It's the org chart, the job descriptions, the set procedures, all designed by management for efficiency and control.
So, like the company's rule book,
Yeah.
the way things are supposed to work.
Yeah,
But I'm guessing real life isn't always so neat and tidy.
exactly. Right alongside that formal structure, you've got this informal organization
Okay.
that comes from how people actually interact and the relationships they form at work.
Got it.
It's that web of friendships and alliances, those unspoken understandings that influence how things really get done.
So it's the unwritten rules of the game.
Right.
Those behind-the-scenes dynamics that can be just as important as the official structure.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give an example of how that plays out in the workplace?
Imagine you need a decision made quickly, but the official process involves tons of approvals.
Okay.
It could take weeks. If you've got a good informal network, though,
Yep.
you might know someone in another department who can help you navigate things faster or even pull some strings to speed things up.
So it's like having an inside track. It sounds like understanding that informal side of things can be as crucial as knowing the official structure,
Absolutely.
especially for things like delegation and getting things done efficiently.
Savvy managers, they know the power of both the formal and the informal, and they find ways to work with both.
So bringing it back to Wipro, their transformation wasn't just about changing things on paper.
Right.
It was about changing how people interacted and did their work.
Exactly. They built this culture of empowerment and accountability
Okay.
that went beyond any formal structure.
Yeah.
They encouraged employees to take ownership, communicate openly, and work together across different teams.
And it sounds like delegation was a big part of creating that culture.
It was.
By giving people responsibility and letting them make decisions, they were saying, we trust you.
Right.
We trust you to do good work and contribute to our success.
Exactly. That trust, it's a powerful motivator.
Yeah,
It can make people feel proud of their work, and that leads to better results for everyone.
that's true.
Yeah.
But to make delegation truly effective, it needs to go hand in hand with accountability.
Absolutely.
Accountability. That's a word we hear all the time. But I think it's worth defining what it really means.
Yeah.
Especially in the context of delegation and decentralized organizations like Wipro.
You're right. At its heart, accountability means taking responsibility for your actions and what comes of them.
Okay.
It's about owning your decisions and the results you achieve.
So it's not just about following orders.
No.
It's about being proactive,
Right.
taking initiative,
Yeah,
and standing behind your work.
exactly. And accountability is essential for any organization.
Okay.
But it's even more critical when you have decentralized structures like Wipro's, where the power to make decisions is spread out more.
Because if you're giving people the power to make choices,
Right.
you also need to hold them accountable for what happens as a result.
Oh.
Makes sense.
Hmm.
But how do you build a culture of accountability without making everyone feel like they're constantly being watched or judged?
That's a great question. The key is to approach accountability in a way that's supportive and constructive, not about punishment or fear.
So create an environment where it's safe to take risks,
Yes.
to make mistakes, and learn from them.
Exactly. Provide clear expectations, regular feedback, and support along the way.
I see.
Accountability should be a tool for growth and development, not a weapon.
I like that way of looking at it. It makes it seem much less scary and much more empowering.
And when it's done right, accountability can actually be really motivating.
Really?
Yeah, when people feel ownership and responsibility for their work,
Yeah.
they're more likely to go above and beyond to achieve great things.
So accountability isn't just about avoiding blame.
No.
It's about building pride and ownership, which ultimately makes people perform better and creates a more positive environment.
Precisely. And that's something Wipro understood in their transformation.
Okay.
They created a culture where people felt empowered to make decisions, but also accountable for the results.
And that helped them reach those incredible results. It's amazing to think about how these seemingly simple concepts, organizing, structuring, delegating, decentralizing, and accountability, can have such a huge impact on a company's success.
It's true. These aren't just abstract ideas. They're the building blocks of successful organizations.
Yeah.
And Wipro's story shows us how they can be the key to achieving ambitious goals and competing on a global scale.
What's really exciting is that these concepts aren't just relevant for big corporations like Wipro.
Right.
They apply to organizations of all sizes, from small businesses to nonprofits, even to our personal lives.
Absolutely. Whether you're leading a team, working on a project, or just trying to manage your own to-do list, these principles can help you bring more structure, clarity, and effectiveness.
As we wrap up our deep dive into Wipro's journey, I'm curious to hear what you think is the biggest takeaway for our listeners. What's the one big idea they should walk away with?
For me, it's that organizational structure isn't just some theoretical concept that only matters to people at the very top, CEOs and consultants.
Right.
Right.
It's something that actually affects everyone.
Yeah,
It really impacts our daily work,
it does.
our chances to grow, and even how satisfied we are with our jobs.
It's easy to get lost in the weeds of org charts and reporting lines, but Wipro's story, it reminds us that it's all about people in the end.
Yeah, and it's a great example of how designing your organization well can be a win-win situation.
It can.
It's good for the company and the people who work there.
Absolutely.
Makes you wonder how many organizations are struggling out there
Yeah.
just because they're clinging to these outdated structures or they're not delegating effectively.
Right. Or they haven't built that culture of accountability that we were talking about.
Really makes you think.
It brings up a big question for our listeners.
Look that.
How do these concepts apply in your work, in your life?
Yeah.
Whether you're leading a team or part of a huge company or even just managing your own personal projects, these principles can really help you.
Such a good point.
And if there's one thing I hope people take away from this whole deep dive, it's that designing an organization isn't a one-time thing.
Right.
It's an ongoing process.
It is.
As the world changes, as your company grows, as your goals change, you have to adapt.
Okay.
You have to adjust your structure to fit.
Makes sense.
So be flexible, experiment, and don't be afraid to try new ways of working.
Always good advice.
And remember, the goal is to create an environment where success is possible,
Yeah.
both for the organization as a whole and for the individuals within it.
Well said.
So,
As we wrap up this deep dive into the world of organizational design, I have a final thought-provoking question for our listeners to consider.
Okay, I like it.
If you could redesign your own work environment, what would you change?
Interesting.
What structure, systems, or processes would you put in place to make things more empowering,
Right.
more fulfilling, and more effective
Yeah,
for both you and your team?
that's an excellent question to think about.
And remember, there's a ton of knowledge out there about all of this.
So much to explore.
Don't stop learning.
Keep
Keep digging. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Wipro's incredible journey.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep pushing the limits of what's possible.